Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. My wife and I moved into our new house about a year ago. It's in a nice quiet neighborhood with big trees and neat lawns. Our house sits at the top of a hill with a long shared driveway that leads up from the street below. The driveway is split down the middle, with our side on the left and our neighbors on the right. When we first moved in, our neighbor Frank seemed friendly enough. He welcomed us to the neighborhood when we were moving boxes. He was retired, having worked as an accountant his whole life. His wife had passed away a few years back. He spent his days puttering around the house and tending to his flower beds. The first hint of trouble came a few months after we moved in. I was backing my car down the driveway when I noticed a new addition, a red and white striped gate stretching across the bottom of the driveway. There was a keypad and intercom built into the metal frame. No one had mentioned anything about a gate being installed. I walked over to Frank's front door and knocked. When he answered, I asked him about the gate. He said it was for security. Said he was tired of people using our shared driveway as a turnaround. Claimed cars would speed up and down, despite the fact that I'd never seen any do that in the year we'd lived there. He said the gate would keep out the riffraff. I told Frank that while I understood his concern, I wasn't comfortable having a gate that blocked access to my own property. We went back and forth for a while, but he stubbornly refused to take the gate down. He said it was already installed and paid for, so tough luck. A few days later, a letter showed up in my mailbox. It was from Frank, stating that in order to receive the code for the gate's keypad, I would need to pay him a $50 monthly maintenance fee. $50 every month for access to my own driveway. I couldn't believe it. I went over and told Frank in no uncertain terms that I would not be paying a cent for access to the driveway I already had every right to use. Frank claimed it was to cover the cost of maintaining the gate, but I knew this was just an excuse to make me pay for something that only benefited him. Over the next few weeks, the situation escalated. I had to park at the bottom of the hill and walk up the driveway to get to my house. Frank refused to give me the gate code without paying the fee. One night I came home to find he had changed the locks too, so my key no longer worked. I contacted my lawyer and explained the situation. He said because it was a shared driveway, Frank had no right to block my access or charge me a fee. He drafted a strongly worded letter demanding Frank remove the gate immediately. Frank must have contacted his own lawyer because a few days later I got a letter back asserting it was his driveway so he could do as he pleased. The lawyers went back and forth, but Frank refused to budge. I'd had enough of the whole thing. I bought some heavy-duty bolt cutters and removed the gate myself one afternoon while Frank was out. It felt good slicing through that chain. I hauled the pieces of the gate out to the curb for trash pickup. When Frank got home and saw the demolished gate, he was furious. He came pounding on my door, screaming that I destroyed his property. I told him he should never have put up the gate in the first place. Frank said he was calling the police and suing me. The police came, but once I explained the situation, they said it was a civil matter. Frank filed a lawsuit in small claims court. I presented my evidence, the letter from my lawyer, photos of the shared driveway. I explained how Frank was trying to extort money from me for access to my own property. The judge ended up ruling in my favor, noting the driveway was equally shared by both homes. She ordered Frank to remove the remnants of the gate and unlock the shared locks. She forbade him from making any changes that would block my access. Frank begrudgingly complied after losing the court case, but our once cordial relationship was shattered. We avoid each other now. I realize you never truly know someone until a dispute arises. Frank's true stubborn, petty nature was revealed when he tried to use that gate to control me. In the end, though, justice prevailed. I'm just glad I can use my own driveway freely again. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Okay, so some background. My house is literally connected to my elementary school's perimeter. I used to occasionally go there at the ripe age of 15 to zoom around with my RC nitro cars on weekends. No cars. Actually, the parking gates were closed, but not the human entrances. Rinse and repeat for 2 years with no problems. I even had patrolling RCMP officers come over and try out my cool toys. In return, they would pull out a huge drone from their car and fly it around me to show me what drones are like and how fast they can go. This went well until 2015. Then, in June 2016, I'm still doing that stuff when suddenly I hear police sirens. Out comes a cop who gives me a huge lecture about how I'm on federal property and I need to immediately get off because I do not have permission. This hotshot acted like I was stealing stuff or something. He even looked through my bag without permission and found a pack of dangerous liquid packs, which turned out to be rubbing alcohol for my hands. Anyway, he issues me a $187 ticket for unlawfully operating a remote-controlled something or other. I forgot. I was thinking, screw this. I'll fight it in court. I did my research, and the ticket he gave me was actually for people who zoom around in their oil-powered RC planes in private spaces without permission. This was obviously some nonsense. I even got a recording of his car dealing with me. A few months later, I go to court to contest it. That's the set date. The jerk cop is there, and he tells me that before I go to court, he can cut my fine in half if I plead guilty. I say no, and I'm pretty sure he said freaking jerk under his breath. We go inside the courtroom, and the jerk is all loud and proud when giving his statement. He straight up lies, saying I was being belligerent and I almost ran away in fear. Well, cameras don't lie, jerk. When it was my turn to give my statement, I played back his cruiser dash cam, which clearly showed him being a jerk, gesturing with his hands as if he's going to fight a 17-year-old puny 5'8" guy. The judge really grilled him. She constantly said this was an abuse of power, a waste of resources, and recommended the officer to read up on what public and federally restricted property was. The whole ordeal was embarrassing for him, and I kind of felt bad because people were giving him angry looks the whole time. Anyway, the ticket is thrown out and I head out of the room. I see the cop in the parking lot, and right as I pass by, he says exactly, frigging brown jerk, go to hell. I was really shocked by this, so I went home and filed a complaint at his depot. No response for 7 days, then 15. So I call them back about it. Yes, he is not working at this branch anymore, but we can still assist you with anything pertaining to this report, sir. No problem, thanks. That was it. The jerk either got fired or got moved away. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I worked in this small family-owned office that operates 24/7. There are about 25 employees in total, but in the office, there are only around 12 of us. The rest work off-site. There's a woman who works here. Let's call her Jill. Jill is almost 40 and has been here for about 10 years. For reference, I have been here for just over 4 years. Since I was hired, and from what I've heard throughout her entire employment, she has never agreed to switch shifts with anyone. Not once. She has never done anyone a favor, no matter what. Yet she has no issue constantly asking other people to switch shifts with her. A year into my employment, my brother needed emergency surgery, and I begged her to cover my shift the next day. All she said was, "Sunday's my only day to sleep in. Sorry." I never forgot that. Whatever, she's not obligated to switch shifts. It's her prerogative if she wants to be universally disliked by our entire office. Anyway, Jill got pregnant about 7 months ago, completely accidentally, and was actually quite freaked out about it for a while. She's been nauseous her entire pregnancy, and even keeps a trash can next to her desk, just in case she can't make it to the bathroom. Yesterday, she was feeling really sick, and around 12:30 p.m., she asked our boss if she could leave early. He told her she could only leave if she could get someone to agree to finish her shift. Our shifts are mainly 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., with periodic split shifts thrown in as needed. I was working the morning shift yesterday, scheduled to leave at 3 p.m., and she was scheduled until 7 p.m. The only other person who could have stayed for her had plans right after his shift, so I was her only option. She waited until 2:45 p.m. and then sauntered up to my desk, puppy dog eyes fully engaged, and asked me to stay for the rest of her shift because she was really feeling ill. Now I'm on Reddit a lot, and I never forgot that post about the manager refusing to allow her employee to be at her dying son's bedside. There's a line in that text exchange that I loved and have been waiting for the perfect moment to use, and this was it. I swivel to face her, look her right in her eyes, trail my eyes down to her bulging, unplanned, pregnant stomach, and pointedly say, "A lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part." Then I swivel right back and continue working without another word. It was glorious. Her face instantly dropped. It looked like someone had farted in her mouth the way it twisted. She didn't say a thing and just waddled away back to her desk, absolutely furious. 15 minutes later, I stand up and loudly announce my departure and that if anyone needs me, I'll be at home taking a nap. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So I'm a banker. Not the Gordon Gekko type, but the other kind. The one where every time you try to describe what you do, people give you a blank stare and try to say something polite. I worked in corporate finance at a large German bank. Speaking English and German was absolutely required. Ideally, you would speak another language as well since we financed a lot of stuff all over the world. I worked in a mid-office function, right in between the sales guys with the huge paychecks and the back office guys who would drop everything at 5 p.m. no matter how important it was. My job back then was to support the sales guys by basically doing their busy work and taking over a deal as soon as it was signed. After a deal was signed and paid out, you needed to monitor it for the whole length of its run, collect documents, reports, balance sheets, and watch out for legal requirements, as well as take part in international meetings and generally be available for everything anyone needs while coordinating all the in-house departments. Basically, I was the first guy you reached when you came in from outside and wanted something to do with the financing in question. We were separated into different product groups. When I started, my boss sent me to a product that was managed pretty badly by a woman in her 50s, who still worked as she did during the 1990s, and this was the late 2010s, and a younger guy who worked with the dedication of a local public servant, or DMV worker, for the Americans. So the product was basically going to waste, and I was supposed to save it. I worked hard for a few months to reorganize everything, having to deal with my older colleague who officially was my senior, while actually not knowing anything, and the younger guy who didn't do anything, but I got it sorted. The boss was happy and sent me to another product. Now, Product 1 suffered because of the people, but also because the older lady was constantly sick. Product 2 suffered because the woman in question didn't speak English very well and made mistakes. That was an easy fix. I set up our in-house systems for them so that they would receive reminders when the contract required it, and those reminders gave them a detailed description in German of what they had to do. The boss was even happier. By this point, I did the major work of 2 products, when everyone else on the team had a main product and worked part-time, like 30%, in a secondary product. I did 100% for 2 products, but since everyone worked very slowly, it didn't stress me too much. So a young colleague decided to leave for another department, and someone had to take his place. I was tired of Product 1 anyway and told my boss that I would take Product 3 together with Product 2, but he would have to have another colleague take over for me in Product 1 since this had been streamlined so much already that it wasn't much work. The boss agrees, if I am always ready to help out. I think you can see where this is heading. Think, naive employee believes working a lot will get him praise, a common theme here. I agree as well. I start on Product 3, and pretty soon I am handling 75% of all deals in that area. I have a part-time colleague who is incredibly slow because she trusts no one's work, not even her own, and spends hours checking and rechecking everything, and a younger colleague who is beloved by my boss's boss's boss because he plays football, soccer to the Americans. This is where it starts to go wrong. The younger colleague gets a lot of projects besides not caring and not working on them properly. Suddenly, I realize that I have worked there for years, and no one will give me a project or anything else that would allow me to develop, even though I do the work of 3 people, and I am still working in Product 1 as my replacement takes no responsibility and shoves everything troublesome my way. I say as much to my boss. Yeah, I know, the younger me kind of lost out when the brains were handed out. It didn't help that he never gave me more than 100% on my yearly evaluations, always finding a reason why he couldn't give me more. Mostly it was because it would have been unfair for everyone else, and I wanted to please, so I didn't say anything. While I found out that the young football guy routinely got 125% while doing far less than I did. My boss was completely understanding and nice and said that something will come. Now I am constantly angry and depressed, and it's starting to affect my health. The boss tells me to take it slow and to actually call in sick when I am sick. So yeah, I do exactly that. Cue malicious compliance. I have a young child at this stage, and I'm tired and angry and depressed and get a lot of colds and other illnesses. Looking back, I can only assume it had something to do with my mental state, so I get sick about a week or 2 every quarter. Add to that the 30 days of vacation time and the fact that I had to lose a lot of overtime, and I suddenly wasn't there 24/7 anymore. And it turns out that my colleagues are not only unable to do their own jobs without me constantly supporting them, but they are definitely unable to do my job as well, because I had taken on so much responsibility. It became pretty clear that all the so-called seniors, a job I was denied as someone would have had to leave before I could get it, completely relied on me. No one could get my Excel tables to work. I still don't get why people don't just Google stuff. Excel isn't exactly rocket science. And deadlines were being missed left and right. I kind of hoped that this would cause the bosses to realize how important I was. But instead, all the colleagues complained that I was constantly absent, and I actually came back to a very negative place that hated me, and a boss who wrote he abandoned his colleagues in my performance review, even though that sort of thing would get thrown out by any HR in Germany. Q second malicious compliance. I got really angry and told my boss that instead of blaming me, he should see what I actually did for the team and how it wouldn't even work properly without me. He was polite about it, but basically said they don't need me. I'm just one of the guys there. So I quit, and I am beyond grateful I did. I now have a job in a local bank 20 minutes from where I live, instead of 1.5 hours. They actually care about their customers and their employees. Everyone tries to work constructively with everyone else, and when we meet for drinks, it's actually nice and has nothing to do with work. Here, no one gives a damn about education or rank, and it's the first time in my life that I don't dread going to work. The next one is an entitled people story. I was traveling by myself for the first time, and I'm only 18. I booked the aisle seat specifically because I didn't want to be in the middle of two strangers, as that would make me very uncomfortable and conscious. I paid extra for the seat for this reason. When I got to my seat, there was a middle-aged man, I would say around 30-40 years old, in my seat. Normally, I'm very socially anxious, and this time even more so as it was my first time alone. But there was no way I was going to sit in between two random strangers. So I did what anybody would do, and informed him that this was my seat and showed him my boarding pass. He admitted it wasn't his seat, but that his coworker was in the seat next to him on the next row, and he wanted to be with him. Instead, he offered me his seat, which he said was the window seat. The window seat is my favorite, but costs more. So in my head, I was getting a good deal, and I happily took it. I basically hopped, jumped, and skipped to take the seat and settle down happily. That was until another man, B, came and told me that I was in his seat. I looked at A, expecting him to pull out his ticket showing I was in his seat, but instead, this man literally looked at me sheepishly and said that his seat is actually the middle seat. He hoped I didn't mind sitting in the middle. Not only did this man lie to me about his seat, hoping that the seat was actually empty, but he also expected me to be okay with sitting in the middle. At this point, I'm raging a little. I might be socially anxious, but I'm not a pushover. I told him no. I only agreed because he said his seat was the window seat, and that he needs to move to his seat, or I will call the crew to sort this out. At this point, he just kept parroting the words, "My coworker is here. I want to sit next to him. Maybe you can be a sweet little girl and sit in the middle just this one time." The moment he said that, I realized I only had to deal with this because I was young and a woman. So now I'm livid and immediately call for the crew after repeatedly saying no because, again, I paid extra for the seat. Even when the crew came to sort it out, he wasn't listening. He kept telling them that there wasn't any issue and that this was just a small disagreement that could be sorted between us. When I informed them what was happening and they requested him to move, he just kept saying, "Maybe you can be nice, and can you please do me this favor?" Then he immediately switched to, "You know you should respect your elders. Why do you need the aisle seat? You can easily fit in the middle." Turns out the other person wasn't even his coworker. He was a random person who had his earphones in, completely unaware of the situation until it was escalated. At this point, I could not believe the entitlement. I told him I paid extra for the seat, and if he wanted the seat, maybe he should have paid the extra fees, and that since he didn't and I did, I was going to sit in the seat I paid for, and he can deal with it. Thankfully, the crew basically forced him out of my seat and into his, with the threat of him being removed from the aircraft. The entire time he kept looking at me saltily and muttering under his breath on how the youth of today are so disrespectful and they should give priority to older passengers and the men. Of course, I ignored it. It was even funnier when he wanted the non-veg meal and had to get the veg one because I got the last one. He threw a fit about this as well, but I pre-ordered my meal while he didn't, so I was offered it first. At this point, the crew was getting sick of him, and they told him they could give him an aisle seat in a row that was behind us. He obviously jumped at this opportunity. The crew switched him out for this nice lady. Turns out he got the very last row near the lavatory, which is why the lady was happy to switch in the first place. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.